All right, Season 2 Turbo Boost launching on May 13th. Dinars, Extended Myth Track, and higher item level crest. So we finally got some answers as to what's going on with Dinars and what's going on with the rest of the season. And people have been pretty upset. We're going to take a look at what's actually going to be changing so we can kind of cover all the changes. And then I'll kind of talk about how I feel about a bunch of the stuff. But just so you guys are in the loop, quick summary of what's launching on May 13th. Hero and Myth Track are both extending to 8 from 6. So now it's going to be similar to what we have in Champion Track right now, where it goes all the way up. I think the gear is going to be increased by 6 item levels. So it should be, what, 684? Maybe? Maybe it'll end up being 685. We're going to have to wait and see exactly what the top end of Myth Track is. Dinars will be available weekly, but they take 3 dinars to be able to purchase an item, which is not super surprising. This is how it was in one of the seasons where you actually it took multiple dinars. I think it was like Dragonflight Season 4, where it took multiple dinars to actually be able to purchase something. Dinar gear also requires mythic bosses to be killed for the myth track piece, which is the part that people are most annoyed about. Craft gear, you can recraft it at +6 item level. Then things like crest caps are getting removed, and then there's delve improvements. So that's a summary. Turn this in real quick. Okay, so yeah, Blizzard at the very top of this, they say hero and myth track upgrades will extend 2 upgrades from 6 to 8, and the cap for crest is lifted. Additionally, Valor Stones become Warbound for the remainder of the season, and Mythic Plus drop rates for Warbound until equipped gear is also being doubled. Okay, so the hero myth track upgrades going up 2 per is kind of an interesting change. It doesn't really do all too much. I'm a little bit surprised that they're doing this. A couple reasons that they would potentially do this: obsolete Cersei Circlet a little bit more. There's some specializations like Balance Druid and a couple of other specs that are still using Cersei Circlet. It's long-term BIS. That could be one of their ways of trying to kind of tackle that and get that out and get those off those specializations that are wearing it. It also soft nerfs the content, where now doing just like getting 3 KIO, being able to clear the raid on hero or mythic levels, being able to get 10s done, all is going to be a little bit easier. And in a way that they feel like it should be for later on in the patch, it's going to basically just make your gear a lot better. So those are some of the reasons that they could be doing it. Now, it's going to be a little bit worse for alts that start a little bit later on into the patch. Ultimately, it's probably not that big of a differentiator, moving it from 6 to 8, especially whenever you're looking at the cap for crests. The grind is going to be a little bit higher, especially, again, if you're starting an alt like later on in the season, the grind's going to be a little bit longer. But, again, not the biggest change ever, and just in isolation, it's not that big of a deal. Kind of a strange change. I'm actually surprised they're making this change. Additionally, Valor Stones becoming Warbound for the remainder of the season. Great change. Nothing to really say negative about that. It's one of those things that Valor Stones are obnoxious, and having started my Zero to Hero series on my Ellie Shaman, I got Valor Crest limited fairly early on. Only one time, but whenever you're Valor Crest limited, or Valor Stone limited, it's really annoying. You'd rather be Crest limited than Valor Stone limited, and Valor Stones are just not a particularly great system. So making them Warbound, even though it is like halfway through the season, that's kind of a big thing. There's also Mythic Plus drop rates for Woo gear being doubled. Great. Again, if you're trying to start an alt, that's fantastic. I think that Woo gear, particularly those from end of Mythic Plus dungeons, doesn't drop high enough rate. You don't really get too many pieces, and so I think that this is a good change. All in all, though, I mean, these changes, they don't really do a ton. It's kind of staying to the trend of they want this to be like Season 2 Turbo Boost. It's kind of like whenever Growl talked about it on the podcast this week, how in Diablo they made like a super loot weekend, right, where everything was doubled, all the drop rates were doubled, kind of like that, where Blizzard's making the back end of the season, they're going to increase the item level, they're going to increase they remove the crest cap, they're going to make Valor Stones easier, they're going to basically make the gearing of characters even faster, ideally. Okay, so the other stuff that's changing. New weekly quest. Take up a new weekly quest to defeat 4 raid bosses from Liberation of Undermine, earning 1 puzzling cartel chip per week at a maximum of 6 puzzling cartel chips per character. And then you get a raid gear vendor where you can visit Consultant Rexel and Dornegal, located near the Great Vault, to purchase a select group of carefully curated items from the Liberation of Undermine raid, such as weapons, trinkets, and other special items. Each item can be purchased with 3 puzzling cartel chips. Players can purchase mythic and heroic gear, but they will require the associated boss to have been defeated at least once on any difficulty to purchase hero track gear, and at least once on mythic difficulty to purchase myth track gear. So, Um, it's one of those things that Blizzard has constantly stated that they want Dinars to be bad luck protection, right? They don't want Dinars to be a way of deterministically being able to obtain items. I think that they view deterministic loot just in general as a very bad thing for the state of the game, and they don't want players who are not doing that content to be able to deterministically have that. That's kind of what I'm reading whenever I'm reading this. For people who are mythic rating, this is honestly probably just like a pretty good thing in general. It should allow, you know, with the elongation of myth track, it should allow them to get cutting edge a little bit easier. It nerfs the raid, and then they can guarantee these rewards. Because here's the thing with items like Best in Slots, like Jaster Diamond, like the Sprocketmonger Lock and Stock Cloak, the very rare items have a very low drop rate, to the point where you basically get, like, you might have, even if everybody wanted it, you might have like 25 to 50% of your raid with these items at the end of the tier, whenever you're factoring in the vault and the amount that drops from the boss. Very rarely do these items actually drop from the boss themselves. And so adding a way of being able to deterministically have them is a positive, especially for these people who are raiding. Now, this is not what most players, including myself, actually expected out of the system. I didn't expect it to be purely this bad luck protection measure for people who are already mythic rating. I kind of expected it to be some level of like deterministic, I can go out and buy this piece of gear that I want. Particularly, especially since like later on in the season you go, the less sanctity, I would say, is in the gear itself. And, you know, using the Dinars, you can end up, you know, creating this fun situation where the Best in Slots is cool, the Jaster Diamond is cool, the Mug Moxie's Jug is cool. There's like a bunch of stuff, you know, the Aya Kazan, like there's a bunch of items that are from the raid that are very sweet. And you, especially if you're like primarily a Mythic Plus player like myself right now, you really want these pieces, but at the same point, you don't want to commit all the time that it takes to progression raid. Now, Blizzard is going to be giving these pieces of gear at a higher frequency to these people who are progression rating, to the point where it is a bad luck protection for them to guarantee that they're able to obtain these cool pieces of gear. So the gap between the maximum level Mythic Plus player and the maximum level raider has definitely increased, and like the difference between the average Mythic Plus player and the average raider has also definitely increased. Whenever I'm talking like average Mythic Plus player, I'm talking about like average high-end-ish, and then like average Mythic raider. It has definitely increased, because now they're going to be able to get this gear at much higher frequency, and you aren't. Now, immediately I read this change, and this heavily negatively affects me. So I'm somebody who, I like to get Mythic Plus title every single season. I tend to view it as like not that bad to have mostly Mythic Plus gear, because the alternative isn't like that egregious. But it kind of is this season. Blizzard added in a bunch of really interesting cantrip items, such as the Best in Slots and the Jaster Diamond, that I sim the Jaster Diamond, and it's like a 2% damage gain for my character. So it's like a huge deal to be able to have. Now, I could, on one hand, I've killed Heroic Gallowix. I could get that on Hero Track, and you know they are increasing Hero Track, so that's not that bad. But you know, it's still a pretty sizable downgrade from the Mythic alternative. The same with Best in Slots. Best in Slots is my BIS item by like a decent amount, but it's still worse than just like other Myth Track equivalents, to the point where I would otherwise be wearing just like a crafted weapon for the remainder of this patch. And so this has kind of put me in a weird situation where now I'm gonna have to start raiding again. And I've started messaging in guilds, and I'm just like, okay, well, with these changes, I don't feel like I actually can be on equal footing with people gear-wise, and now I'm going to have to start raiding again, because, you know, raid gear is improving drastically. For raiders. For people who are raid logging, this is absolutely an excellent change. For people who are only doing Mythic Plus, this is creating a larger gap between those people, those separate groups of people. I think that this is not what people wanted from Dinars, and people are pretty angry about it. I think that the Great Vault should have been the way that Blizzard is giving deterministic loot to people. That way you can give deterministic loot from Mythic Plus to Mythic Plusers, or deterministic loot from raid to raiders. And that way you can actually kind of create this situation where you're able to kind of pick and choose where the pieces come from. So say you want a Signa of the Priory, and you're this Mythic Plus only player, you can guarantee to get the Signa of the Priory, because honestly, you know, the difference between a House of Cards on Myth Track and a Signa of the Priory on Myth Track is like kind of whatever. But the fact that there is this huge difference now between I can't guarantee get a piece from Mythic Plus, and I can guarantee get these BIS items from Raid. That seems a little bit jank. It also is going to heavily incentivize players buying Raid boosts. That's one of the first things that I saw from some people that I'm in circles with, is that now they're going to be starting to have to shell out for basically like 8 out of 8 clear to make sure that they can be able to buy these items, which is ridiculous. You know, anything that continues to promote boosting in World of Warcraft, I think boosting sucks in the game, and I understand why people do it. Like, I need gold. Like, frankly, it's really hard to exist in this game without gold. I need gold, so you're going to have to shell out to buy a boost. But at the same point, boosting sucks, and anything that continues to promote boosting even further is, like, in my opinion, pretty bad for the game. So I don't think that's particularly great. I think that this is honestly just like the wrong way of going about it, and there's a lot of people that this ends up negatively affecting. Basically, gearing outside of Raid is just called gearing, right? Like, and whatever, for the vast majority of people, this is just their gearing, and now their version of gearing, especially compared to their peers, is getting worse. This more than ever makes me wish that Tin Man would come back. I know I'm gonna get on this pedestal here for a couple seconds, but say I have 5 other friends, it's me and 5 other people. I can find 4 people probably to raid with us. I can't find 14, and so there's no way of like casually engaging in the content in Mythic raiding in the same way that you can casually engage in like high keys. And it feels really bad whenever now these people who are doing the max level of Mythic raid are able to get gear that is substantially better than you, and you're going to feel like you're just way worse off for it, and feel like you're way more obligated to raid than you have been in the past. Because now, instead of these items being like, oh, okay, this person's probably not going to have a Jaster Diamond, this person's probably not going to have the Ansarek Ring, now they're definitely going to have the Ansarek Ring, they're definitely have the Jaster Diamond, right? And so it's going to be like a pretty sizable damage gain for these players, just as a whole. I don't think that this is going to be kept at the very beginning of the season next season. I would highly recommend them to not keep this in the future, because it was already a nerf to Mythic Plus only gearing whenever they went from 4 out of 4 myth track to 6 out of 6 myth track, because the hero track gear relative to that already got a lot worse. And say you kill 5 bosses in a Mythic raid, you're going to, on average, get like 2 pieces of loot per week, 1 from the vault and then 1 from that raid. Whereas these people who are doing Mythic Plus only, they're only going to get 1 piece of Myth Track gear per week. And so the Myth Track gear is a lot more valuable. And so if the Myth Track is extended to 8 levels, this can be a problem, especially early on in the season, where some of that hero track gear is like really bad. Okay, moving forward, Delve improvements. They made Delves a little bit better, where they boosted brand experience. Delver's journey progress is easier to gain. Rewards from the Delver's Bounty are easier to gain. They also are giving you more Crest Valor Stones and an increase to repeatable earned crests across Delve tiers. So the mole people, you know, if you're only doing Delves, this is a great change. I mean, it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to gear through Delves. It's already really easy to gear through Delves, but it's going to make it even easier to gear through Delves. It's going to make it easier to get Crest through Delves and stuff like that. On top of that, they changed professions, so if they only slammed down the extended hero and myth track, that would make profession gear a lot worse. Now it's no longer like that. Now recipes crafted with a spark of fortune can now be recrafted or crafted with an augmentation matrix, empowering them and allowing them to gain 6 item levels, which you know, should be looking to offset the track moving. So they're not trying to make your gear just that much worse. I'm not a huge fan. I think for obvious reasons, I think that this is, you know, pushing me to raid again. I think I'm going to have to raid again whenever I'm looking at some of this gear stuff and these gear differences. So I've already started messaging some guilds like that. I think that this is just kind of proving that it's the decision point, and Blizzard kind of stated this before, but players hoped that they were going to change their mind and make it more of a deterministic loot thing instead of like a bad luck protection loot thing. And right now it's just bad luck protection for raiders only, and it's good for them. And it's not great for pretty much anybody else who is invested in the system at all, particularly those people who want to push past, you know, 3KIO achievements or push for rank 1 titles. Anybody who looks to, like, you know, kind of play the game more competitively in a Mythic Plus sense, and they don't want to raid, it's making it harder for them to actually play the game at a high level. Which sucks. I don't think it should be like that. I think that Blizzard should maybe look to like rethink the system and how this is functioning. But Blizzard is basically stating that this is only bad luck protection for raiders only, and that's it. But yeah. Okay. That's going to be it for me today. Not exactly super thrilled with the changes. I'm interested in your thoughts down in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.